From celebrities and politicians to the streets, the president's executive order on immigration has set off an earthquake of reactions. It's almost impossible to stay uninvolved. But is all the talk creating too much pressure and stress?
No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here.
Protests erupted around the country as thousands of Americans exercised their constitutional right to free speech and disagree with the commander-in-chief, or express their support because he followed through on a campaign pledge. The pressure to take it all in can be overwhelming. It's not your imagination, and it even has a name, says Dr. Elisa English.
This whole post-election traumatic disorder is real. People are feeling a sense of anxiety, stress, they're feeling fear.
President Trump's executive order temporarily banning immigration from 7 predominantly Muslim countries is sharply dividing the nation. According to a recent opinion poll, 49% of Americans agreed and 42% disagreed. What do you find is the most psychologically damaging to people of what's going on now?
I think that the president is saying things that seem to address people in a way that in many ways makes them feel like they are less than, or there's no real value to their life.
Dr. English says the emotion of fear is real, even if the reason is not founded in an individual's own experience. Stories like that of Dr. Kamal Fadlala of Interfaith Medical Center in Brooklyn strike raw nerves. The Sudanese-born doctor was stopped from boarding a flight back to New York, even though his visa documents were in order.
Don't know what to do.
They're feeling sort of vicarious stress, vicarious trauma. They're living through all that's going on right now with the immigration ban and just feeling as though all of their rights and the values that they've held dear to themselves are no longer available to them, although it may not necessarily be a reality.
No one knows, of course, what comes next. And maybe the only certainty in these times is change. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining us, Albert Cahn. He's an attorney for CARE. That is the Council on American Islamic Relations. He's with the New York chapter. He's also a Harvard law grad. Albert, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Also with us is Sheik Musa Drammeh. He's with the Islamic Cultural Center on Westchester Avenue in the Bronx. He does a tremendous amount of work in the community, also works with the local precinct there to prevent violence in the community. Sheik, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. Also with us is Jonathan Gilliam. He's a former Navy SEAL, former FBI agent. He's a host on Sirius Radio and also host of a very popular page on Facebook. Thank you so much for being with us, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Got it.
Sheik, I want to start with you on this. When this executive order came on so suddenly, what was the reaction in your community, especially among the families, many of whom are immigrants?
Absolutely. Lisa, we're very saddened about what is going on right now, even though we're not surprised. But as I'm sitting here talking to you, we have 4 religious schools gathering at the Museum of Natural History, a program that started 13 years ago after 9/11. Jewish kids and Muslim kids coming together and learning about each other's culture. And all we talk to them about is the value of being American, proud to be American, proud to be inclusive, proud of the diversity. And even though President Trump ran on the most xenophobic, most misogynistic, most Islamophobic, most biased political platform, we still did not expect him to execute what he is executing right now, because this is tearing families apart. And you know, there's a commercial going on where the girl said to the husband, I thought I married an Italian, and they found out that the guy is only 16%
Right.
Italian. All New Yorkers are intertwined culturally, religiously, socially, economically. We may look different, but deep inside we are one. So the Muslim community is terrified, but guess what? The larger community also is terrified, because people are now sacrificing, you know, their Americanness for what is going on.
All right, and let's talk to somebody who's fought for our country. Jonathan Gilliam, as a former Navy SEAL, former FBI agent, this is one of the things that we've heard from, even from some Republicans as well, about this issue.
Sure.
They're saying that this executive order on immigration is un-American, that we are a country of immigrants, and that this is un-American. What's your reaction to that?
Well, first off, let me just say that, you know, none of the stuff that you just said about Donald Trump is true. I could sit here and say all this stuff about Muslims, saying that you know, they're terrorists. I could go on and say that they bring all this stuff into the country. It would make you angry. It's not true. and we need to stop using terms like that to describe each other, because first off, the president is taking action. And that's the first thing, and that's why it's hard on people, because we've had a succession of presidents and politicians that didn't take action. So when you have to back up and backtrack, it's hard on people. It's hard on the people that are in your mosque. It's hard on Americans who are immigrants and who come here for the right reasons. But you can't say that what is happening now is not something that should have happened a long time ago, where we slow down and screen the people coming in properly. What we're facing now is the ramifications of not doing that to begin with. And so it's creating hardships, and it's kind of getting blown out of proportion to the point where people aren't even realizing the facts of why we're doing this.
Okay, well, let's talk about whether or not you're talking about action. Yes, the president took action. Nobody's going to dispute that. But was it effective action? Albert, these 7 countries were also on the radar under the Obama administration as well. What's different now?
There is no precedent in American history in recent years for anything on this scale. We have seen green card holders, people who have lived here for years, people who have families here, people who own businesses here, being told that you can't come back to the city you call home. We've seen immigrants of all sorts being told that we are going to stop you with a blanket ban that goes beyond anything under recent administrations. You know, Mr. Gilliam said that there is a need for action. Well, what we have seen is simply President Trump firing from the hip, making mistakes, and already he's had to backtrack, and already he's had to explain that parts of this were
okay, well,
wrong.
let's talk about whether or not it's effective, because the 7 countries, and I interviewed a Sudanese doctor whose colleague was living in Brooklyn, bank accounts in Brooklyn, had been here for a number of years pursuing his medical career, working at the hospital, at Interfaith Hospital in Brooklyn, and went home to Sudan over the break to visit his family, and went to the airport, was pulled out of the airport, escorted out, even though he had a proper visa, a proper green card, roots, not just roots, but also a job in the United States, and he's taking care of Americans, Jonathan. Doesn't that bother you?
I don't agree with that part of it, with people who are here already and people who have green cards and may have traveled to come back. Hopefully they had been vetted. See, that's the problem again, but a lot of this vetting never occurred. But see, again, when the pendulum swings too far one way, it's going to swing back. And we have to remember the reason this is happening is not to be unfair, not because somebody has a prejudice.
It's the fear of terrorism.
It's because we need not just fear, it's because we need effective countermeasures to people coming in here that could possibly cause this harm. So things have to get worked out, because you're right, in modern history, nobody's done the right thing. Now we're doing the right thing, and we're having to work it out at the same time. It's causing hardships.
Is this the right thing? Now, this doctor, for example, he's off his professional track. He's 2 years away from completing his residency. He's worked 14 years, the last 14 years since he was 20, in order to be in this position, and now he's getting off the track, and it's affecting his career, and probably his family's income too, sending money to his family members.
You can't confuse effective and fair. Is it fair to him that this has happened? No.
But isn't fair part of an American value?
Fair doesn't keep people alive. When you look at war fighting and you look at tactics and fighting an enemy, you have to look at what's effective. And unfortunately, some people are going to be affected because, again, this whole thing is being created because we've had years and years of ineffective leadership, ineffective policies. So now those things will get worked out, and hopefully that individual will be able to go on and prosper and help the American public, just like the Sheik here.
But why be treated like a criminal when you're doing everything right, you're playing by the rules, you're following the rules of the United States? Right. And to be treated like an international criminal?
I don't know exactly, but here's my take on this whole thing, having been in the FBI and seen the incompetence at the high levels of government and in federal law enforcement, is that this swamp that Donald Trump talked about draining really has to do with the people who have been political appointees and who have come up underneath those political appointees. And so the policies were so bad that now people are going to overreact, and the policies may even reach a little too far when we put them in place.
All right, we're going to talk,
but then we bring them back.
Okay, we're gonna talk about that. But is that the way to go? Is the fear of terrorism, does that justify violating what some people say are human rights? We're going to find out what our guests have to say when we come back on Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. Stay with us.
What about the 4,000 people killed in Chicago?
What about 300,000 people?
Listen, that's hogwash.
Okay, let's talk about the effectiveness. The 7 countries, these 7 countries that are predominantly Muslim, that have this 90-day ban. We want to make that clear to everybody. It's for 90 days. Sheik, what about
Lisa, actually, we don't know that it's just for 90 days. The ban will last for 90 days to start, but it could be extended. So we have this specter of potentially an indefinite ban.
Which
on
the law does not state that it has to be 90 days.
What the law states is that the president cannot discriminate against people on the basis of what nation they're coming from. The Immigration and Nationalization Act of 1965, it's a congressional statute. It's been enforced for decades. The president does not get to just make up the law. He has to enforce the law.
So
but he can make an executive order. Senator Booker, Senator Menendez have said that if this is what the president wants to do, basically the president can do it, and there's not a whole lot that can be done to stop him. Is that true or false?
That's false. For over 140 years, the Supreme Court has said that immigrants to this country have rights to due process. They have rights to equal protection. And also, the president can't just go about making law. He has to enforce the laws on the book. But I want to talk about safety, because the 7 countries that got banned here, there is not a single American who has died on American soil because of an attack from these people from the 7 countries.
Right, the 9/11 attackers, most of them came from Saudi Arabia, right? And we've seen the homegrown terrorists involved in the San Bernardino, Boston Marathon bombing, and also the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting.
There hasn't been a single Syrian individual arrested on terrorism charges. There hasn't been a single Libyan individual arrested on terrorism charges since in the last 40 years.
Sudan?
There has been no one.
Iraq?
There has been no one in this country killed by people coming into this country from the 7 prescribed.
Sheik, what about that? The feeling of being portrayed because you're Muslim equals terrorist in some people's eyes.
Well, let's look at the numbers. Numbers don't lie. You have over 20,000 Muslim doctors treating American patients here on the soil. You have
20,000?
Over 20,000 Muslim doctors. You have over 1,000 Muslim police officers protecting New Yorkers. You have thousands of soldiers and informers and translators and undercover agents of Muslim backgrounds protecting Americans. Those are the numbers that don't lie. Number 2, let's look at who's killing whom. Is the gun manufacturers that the GOP protect are the killers, not the Muslims.
Jonathan, what about that? This has been going out all over. Okay, let me respond. What about that? Because people are saying, gun violence. It was a popular Instagram regram all week.
Yes, there's millions and millions of legal guns in this country and gun owners that don't go around killing people. Blaming guns and gun owners.
No, but in terms of the cause of death, opioid addiction is a much bigger killer of Americans than anything else right now.
I tell you who you should be blaming for killing people are bad people who have bad minds. But here's what's happening. 2 things. One, your interpretation of the law skips over U.S. Code 1182 Section F, where the president can specify a section of aliens that would come into this country and halt them from coming in until, for instance, for medicine, for terrorism, for whatever that he deems necessary. We just haven't used that. That's the first thing. The second thing is you going off and saying, first of all, bashing President Trump, and secondly, coming on here and saying that this is a gun manufacturer problem. This is the problem. When the Muslim community does not stand up against Islamists, against jihadists, and join with us saying, we need to screen these people better before they come in here so that we don't get attacked.
Why better?
Because, listen, let me tell you something.
What specifically do you mean?
When you have that language, what happens with the rest of the people in this country is they say, you see, they don't want to help us.
Okay, let me tell you what I do.
But that's not true.
You're avoiding the problem.
Okay, but Sheik, what about that? But Jonathan, just for a fact, there are some imams and some mosques around the country that are actively cooperating, even against some of their members' wishes, actively cooperating with local law enforcement.
But they're not on TV with us right now. And see, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, Sheik,
you're here
says
and
right
you just
here.
said that. And you just said that.
Okay, Sheik, respond, please.
Okay, let me tell you what I do. After 9/11, I went home and I told my wife, I will not share this world with anybody capable of putting his fellow man to this certain death predicament. From there, we launched several programs that are unique in America. Today, as I'm here, 4 schools are now taking interfaith fellowship at the Natural Museum of Natural History. Over 1,000 Jewish and Muslim kids graduate from the program. In my office every Friday, we bring gang members from Bloods and Crips and you name it. And so far, over 104 gang members we have removed. No money, no training, nothing. Because we believe in the value of being American. Number two, we created a program called Peace December.
I was just going to mention it.
Which is started right here in the Bronx. Right now, it's in 19 countries where the month of December are celebrated by every person of every nationality.
What about that?
Last but not least, the best anti-extremism is to demonstrate it. If you come to my center Friday, you will see the Jewish people worshiping at their synagogue. You will see Muslims worshiping in their mosque, coming together as a family. So that's what I do. And guess what happened? This number, most of the shootings in the churches and everywhere are done by white extremists, not Muslims.
Where?
Anywhere in the United States.
Look at Dylan Roof.
What about the 4,000 people? What about the 4,000 people killed in Chicago?
What about 300,000 people?
Listen, that's hogwash.
No, these are facts.
Let me just tell you something. You want to stay on target. You want to stay. Hold on. You want to stay on target with what we're talking about here today. Everything you just said, that's great. You're bringing unity to your community. But the words that you said before that,
and they
do
will
not do anything.
They were all true.
No, it's not true.
By the way,
your opinion. Okay, gentlemen. Let me come back to the issue. Time out. Let's come back to the issue. If this is in fact, as the hashtag that's been all over social media says, hashtag Muslim ban, why aren't other Muslim countries on that list, like Saudi Arabia, like Pakistan? Why aren't any of these other countries on the list if we're so concerned about this?
Anybody who's not an American citizen, that is, I don't care if they're Muslim or not, if they're coming into this country, they need to be screened properly. They're drug dealers.
You're saying across the board?
Everyone.
In terms of the law now, people were in shock about this when this happened because they felt like this was kind of an overnight weekend surprise.
Well, one of the big problems here is this executive order was never properly vetted. And so there was a lot of confusion with the Department of Homeland Security and the agencies that had to put it into effect. That's not me talking. That's Lindsey Graham. That's John McCain. People on both sides of the aisle are saying that this was put together hastily. And right now, there's a lot of confusion because courts are rushing to protect the rights of people who are impacted by this order.
And Sheik, with all due respect to the tremendous work you're doing in the community in the Bronx, which I've witnessed myself as a reporter for Fox 5, with the police department, with the gang members, with the Jewish community there, when you hear these types of phrases and you see these comments, as you do all over social media too, and people say them on the news and say them on television, that Muslims are terrorists, what does that do to you?
Well, again, we go back to the numbers. We have 1.6, 1.7 billion Muslims around the world. And, the troubles are coming from where oil is being drilled. It's about injustice. And these criminals, most of them are reactionists.
But do you think the violence is justified then, if they feel that way?
Lisa, if violence will ever be justified, I would not be here. You know what I do. Nobody justifies violence.
So you condemn that violence?
Well, that's what I do every single day, and that's why I decided to leave Wall Street and go to the Bronx and create an environment where all Bronxites can coexist peacefully. That's what Islam is about. Has absolutely nothing to do with religion. And by the way, report after report after report, and he can vouch to that, most of these extremists were created because of what has happened from the West.
All right, I want to thank all of you for being with us for this episode of Street Soldiers, and thank you so much for sharing all your expertise and your opinions and your insight and helping us form our own opinions as well. Albert Cahn, attorney for CARE, that's the New York chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, and Harvard law school grad. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Sheik Musa, Drammeh Islamic Cultural Center on Westchester Avenue in the Bronx. Thank you so much for being with us. Jonathan Gilliam, former Navy SEAL and former FBI agent. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for watching Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.